This is Fatal Run, released in 1990 for the Atari 7800 Pro system, courtesy of developer Sculptured Software. And what we have here is a reproduction card from the current Atari company, released last year or whenever that Atari 2600 Plus console came out, because it could play both 2600 and 7800 games. And now they've got a 7800 Plus system that does the same thing, and I'm slightly miffed since I'm more of a 7800 guy, but anyway, I got the card. We'll sample some of it here, but Fatal Run is also on the Atari 50 compilation, which is where most of the footage is from anyway, because I had that shit recorded beforehand, so whatever, let's get into it. In Fatal Run, you drive a car with weapons and stuff, and your goal is to eliminate all the enemy cars trying to kill you. The general story of Fatal Run is that you're delivering vaccines from city to city to cure radiation poisoning, and the longer it takes for you to reach the next city, the fewer survivors are left to save. However, the more survivors in a city, the more you get paid in cash to spend on repairs and upgrades to your vehicle, which is a key thing in Fatal Run. So you've got some toys to play with, standard machine gun, some oil slicks for rear-ending foes, a missile or two, and these are limited resources, so once they're out, all you're left with is bumping into enemy cars to kill them, similar to Chase HQ or Battle Outrun on Master System, which can also damage your bumpers that protect you from further damage to your vehicle. Also, you're running on limited fuel. Fortunately, there will be occasional pickups along the road to restock on items, but your main deal is to reach a city so that you can rest up at the shop and use whatever earnings you've gained from surviving civilians to purchase wares for your vehicles before moving on to the next stretch of road. Fatal Run boasts 32 levels of play, and a bit of an uncommon occurrence on the Atari 7800 as far as I know, there's a password system on hand. Every few stages cleared, you'll get a password that will let you continue where you left off. However, doing so will start you off in your default state. No damage, but also no upgrades will be recorded with the password. Needless to say that it will behoove you to start early and build up your wares from there if you fancy better chances of completing your objectives, since later levels yield greater numbers and more aggressive opposition. Fatal Run is quite a bit of fun actually. A deceptively simple driving game on the surface, but there is some depth within its gameplay that is not all that different from games like Road Blaster or Spy Hunter, with all the different weapons at your disposal and the emphasis on gaining funds to repair and enhance your road vehicle. Damage is something to keep track of here, as your vehicle can suffer specific damage that diminishes performance, tire wear, armor damage, that sort of thing. Eventually, it becomes a balancing act to see how much you can spend on repairs while also keeping your tools at the ready against the opposition. Controlling your vehicle is straightforward, with a stick reserved for driving your vehicle, including acceleration and braking, while the buttons are used to cycle through your arsenal and firing your current weapon. And it works pretty slick. Gameplay is somewhat varied at times, but runs the risk of being repetitive over the course of 32 levels. But then that's what passwords are for, so long as you're fine with starting at a disadvantage towards the later stages. Visually speaking, Fatal Run is probably one of the better looking games on the 7800 up to that point, despite its somewhat simplistic looking nature. The individual cars, despite boasting something of a rough appearance, do have some level of detail to them, and the scaling isn't all that bad either. I like the shifting background scenery as you're driving along a mountain path before eventually reaching the city that is your goal line for every stage. I am not a fan of the scrolling text on the bottom left where different messages pop up. This is where you're informed of possible warning signs, item pickups, or what weapon you currently have. The idea is sound, but the scrolling is far too slow, and sometimes I get confounded by what weapon I have on to the point where I misfire the wrong item. There's iconography on the right to tell you these things, but the text bar on the left is what you'll mostly be paying attention to, and it would have been nice if the messages just popped up and be done with it. Still, a minor gripe on an otherwise fine-looking game. Meanwhile, the sound department is a bit drab. A couple jingles played off the recycled derelict 2600 sound processing comes off a bit charming in its own antiquated way, but the constant drumbeat in the background tends to be tiresome. The explosions and weapon sounds are also somewhat weak sounding. Still, I've heard much worse, and this isn't as bad as some other games in the 2600 or 7800 library. Overall, Fatal Run on the Atari 7800 is a perfectly fine little driving game that packs a little more bang for your buck than what's on the surface. The driving is fairly smooth, the gameplay is fairly solid and deeper than surface level implies, and there's more than enough levels to keep you busy, along with a password system to let you keep going further, I guess. All in all, a solid addition to any 700 library, or you could just play it on the Atari 50 thing, that's also equally valid.